Okay, so we are here around New Covent Garden. We're going to start in this area. We are in an area called Nine Elms, which is currently, as we speak, being redeveloped. And regenerated. You can actually see and hear a lot of the construction that's going on in the area still. And there has been a place that's been under works for the last few decades, really. Been a project of Parliament, so to speak, to regenerate the south side of the river. Because it's always been a bit of an embarrassment for Parliament and Westminster that right across the river, you've got one of the most deprived boroughs in London. And it still is, to be fair, but now there's being thrown some cash in trying to, at least externally, spruce up this area a little bit. We're going to start by, we leave it behind all these skyscrapers here. They're very close to something called the Vauxhall Cluster, which a journalist of The Guardian compared very nicely to a set of businessmen in ill-fitting suits standing awkwardly together trying to keep social distancing. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I like the simile of comparing those skyscrapers to that. And I mean, if you look at some of these skyscrapers, they kind of look like, well, I'm not just saying this because I'm Danish, but they look like Lego blocks, ill put together, some of them. Well, that's some of my criticism. Anyway, we're going to go through this new garden market, which was moved to here in 1974 from the old Covent Garden. We've already been up around the Covent Garden area, but the old Covent Garden area used to be the largest fruit and vegetable market in London. That market, official market, has moved to here, south of the river instead. Again, partially to try and develop this area and put some business and industry in this area. So this is where most of the distribution of all the fruit and vegetables and other produce like that you might find in London. So let's keep going and get through the market. So if you look right up there between these glossy-looking penthouses, you can see that strange structure in the middle. That is the focus of today's video. We are talking about the US Embassy and what it looks like today. And look at that. You don't find many buildings around. Well, I suppose you find some, but you don't find many embassies that looks the same as the current US Embassy. It's very interesting. We saw a little thing on Trump not welcome here because Trump famously said, the current American president, that it was a bad deal. He hated the deal, he still hates the deal, that that America has gone for in buying the lease for this land here. And it is usually a bit more of an expensive affair to set up shop as an embassy, or chancery as the official name is. Because whenever you do it in this country, you have to buy a lease. You have to take out a lease. And that can come up and cost a lot of money. So I'm sure that not only Trump, but other Americans think that they got the worst end of the stick when they bought this land here, which was a bit of an industrial wasteland before. Okay, well, so we come through some of the penthouses here, some of the flats, to what they're all built around, to the US Embassy. But before we admire this modern cube, I'd like to hear what you think of the pool. It's a nice pool around here, right? I mean, look at that. Oh, you thought I was referring to that pool? Oh, no, let's look up here. I'm referring to this one. That's the Sky Pool. And, well, you might think it's a public facility. It's not. It's only people who fully own these flats, which will be few and far between, who are able to use the Sky Pool. But the idea is what... And you can see there's someone swimming up there now. Look at that. The idea is that you're able to swim and almost fly and float up above in the sky rise of London, of central London. So here we are at the main dish of today. We are at the US Embassy. The current modern iteration of the US Embassy in London. It was relocated to here in Nine Elms in 2018. So all of this that's built around it is very new. If you came here a couple of decades ago, it would have been way more an industrial wasteland than it certainly is now. Or a construction site, depending on exactly when you came. But a lot of these penthouses and a lot of this area has been built around the embassy to accommodate for the people that work in the embassy, but also to try and attract other businesses and hot new ideas to this area. Again, it's part of that whole regeneration project that's going on along the South Bank. And Nine Elms, which used to be known for its 9 elm trees that almost led up to Westminster and Parliament, is part of that scheme and is being modernized aggressively these days. Same as with, if we got time, we'll go down and see Battersea Battersea Power Station, which is also, I wouldn't say a victim, but one of these targets of modernization and gentrification as well. But anyway, going back to the embassy here, it was moved out of Mayfair. It had a great spot in Mayfair. Historically, it had been placed there for hundreds of years, going all the way back. I think it was 1785, I want to say, when it was first established. Got a great deal there. But after 9/11, the increasing security concerns led the US to eventually move out, both from public pressure, but also from their own desires of having complete control of how they wanted to have their embassy and the security around the embassy. And that has manifested into this disturbing cube, that's at least my opinion, surrounded by a modern Bailey, surrounded by a moat and several rises here to prevent vehicles from driving in, mainly. But there's a little bit of interesting displacement going on with this building because they don't want you to actually pay attention to those security measures. It's all kind of woven in and tried to keep nice and clean. Like even this rise here that you see that is definitely there to keep out vehicles from driving close to the embassy has been veiled as a nice bench that people can sit along, right? And then you got tall grass here. You got a mixture of American and English vegetation going on here. So that's meant to symbolize the union between the US and the UK. But what they don't tell you is that even if you manage to get past this point, and if you were driving through with a vehicle, you would eventually fall down the ha-ha hole that's put there as well, which was a traditional measure back in the day to keep cattle out while not destroying the view. So you got like a deep incline of a hole going down. Here, it's serving more the purpose of having, again, vehicles fall down that hole and not be able to get close, right? But they won't tell you that's the reason. If you look at the official reason, they tell you that it's for biodiversity that they made that little incline there. So that's very interesting. Also the moat, the pond. The architects want you to call it a pond, not a moat. Covers over other security measures such as cameras and such as thick concrete walls that are neatly covered over with little waterfalls and the like. So I like this sort of veiled security measures that's going on. There's even a hedge. There's a hedge in there, which looks quite innocent, but inside the hedge there's a concrete block that's also there to stop vehicles to get through. But you won't see it because of the hedge. So that's pretty smart. So they tell you it's meant to symbolize transparency, green energy, diversity, equality, democracy. That's meant to be the symbolism of the building. But really, once you start digging down into it, what's really going on is, well, dare I say, security, paranoia, and almost military reinforcement. Even the glass at the windows are 5 panes of bulletproof glass. So even the most hardcore rocket launcher or most dastardly grenade you can imagine any terrorist would want to throw at the building will probably not scathe very much. You got these here, they're actually mostly for keeping out birds. At least that's the official explanation. I don't know if there's another reason for them, other than they have a system of generating heat, the heat that's generated from the glass, that goes down to emergency generators. So at least on the green energy part, they're doing their bit. But it's also for selfish interest to make sure that they've got their own emergency generators should electricity shut down in the area. They've prepared for absolutely everything. I think the only embassy that beats this in security might be the one in Baghdad, you know. So that should tell you a little bit about what's actually going on here. It's very interesting. It's a modern castle with a perimeter of safety around it. Architects these days are also trained to design public spaces with counterterrorism in mind specifically. So if you notice this space here, it's very open, right? You can keep an eye on a lot of things going on here at the same time. And that's not by accident. That is actually specifically with counterterrorism in mind. So terrorists will have a harder time of ambushing or attacking. Got onto a bit of a dark subject here. I'm not sure how I can lighten the mood. And maybe I don't need to. But as we go around, you'll see some more of the security measures around. If we see any queues here, that's likely people trying to get a green card or trying to get a visa from the US, or sometimes you might see large queues of people trying to get in. But inside is a huge glass palace as well. There's massive stairways going left and right, and you can see almost every room in there. So the transparency part in some ways might be true as well. I can't remember whether it's only people who's owning the flats that directly connects to it, or whether I think it's anyone who fully owns their apartment are able to use it. But most facilities are closed off to like renters or people who only partially own or own through a mortgage. So you have to own the whole property essentially, or the whole flat, before you can use any of the facilities. That includes the gym, by the way. And it was a small controversy that's been in the news as well, that people who live in affordable housing, there is a bit of affordable housing and social housing here, but many of the facilities are closed off to them, unlike, well, the richer clients who can afford to live here and pay for it cash. Right, so you can even see here, well, there's a little bit of art there to try and soften up the grey starkness of the building, but look at those columns there, keeping up these stilts or whatever you want to call them, holding up the building off the ground. It's another security measure. It's another way of trying to keep it safe from, well, if I put it bluntly, any attacks on the ground. You can even see they've even got extra bollards here to try and keep these first glass offices safe, you know. So yeah, once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere, in particular in London. You start noticing these subtle little features that's all with security in mind. And that is, I'm afraid to say, it's a feature of 21st century building these days. Okay, so now we've left the US Embassy and we are right here at Battersea Power Station, which is another prime example of these very, very recent new modern buildings. I mean, this was open to the public as recently as 2022, so only 3 years ago this was finally opened up and is pretty much as we see it today. Although the consortium of Malaysian investors that bought the property and have restored it into basically a huge shopping mall, they bought it and acquired the rights back in 2018. So almost the same time as the American Embassy, which we can still see from here, by the way, but almost at the same time as that was relocated. So all of this is happening pretty simultaneously, where the South Bank is transforming into a hip area. Whereas back in the day, it used to be a place where taxi drivers refused to take you south of the river at a certain time of night because its reputation was less than pristine. But who knows, in the 21st century, that might very well change. Maybe this will become the new fancy area and North London, north of the river, will be scoffed at in the future. Might never know. But anyway, going back to the power station here, you can see that it's actually been fairly faithfully kept according to the design it originally had. It's one of the biggest brick buildings in the world. We're talking millions of bricks that make up this building here. And the first part of it was built in the 1920s to 1930s. That's what they call the A power station. And B was built right at the end of the 30s, coming up towards the Blitz, and finished in the 50s. So it opened for business again in the 50s and served as a main power station here in London, actually, for a good amount of time, where smog would have been belching out of those chimneys. A coal-fueled power station here in the middle of London, essentially. But it was put out of operation when oil began to replace coal. So it was put out of operation around the 80s, the beginning of the 80s. And that is where it began to fall apart. So it was more or less, it was granted historical great heritage status, but it was still falling apart by the seams. And it was bandied around between different real estate firms that all tried to sell it off to other buyers, make something off of it. But whatever projects they kept coming up with kept failing. So it ended up actually being saddled with a debt of about £500 million. And its current owners were desperate back in the 2010s, around 2011, to sell it to anyone who was willing to take on the debt and the work of restoring the building. And so it ended up falling in the hands in 2018 of this Malaysian consortium of investor firms that I've mentioned before. And I almost can't be bothered saying their names because their names are so dull and boring. They almost intentionally want to be forgotten about. But they have made sure that it's been restored into and turned into an Art Deco shopping mall, which you'll find inside. And we'll go in there in a second and take a look at it as well. You can even go up in the chimneys now. So you can pay a little ticket fee and get all the way up to the top of the chimney. And if you slowly bend your knees like this here, you can get the same effect as being on the London Eye. So a cheaper option and you get more of a view. How about that? It's also, some of you might recognize the chimneys as where Pink Floyd had the photo for their album Animals in 1977. They had a huge inflatable pig that was tied to one of the chimneys here. And eventually it flew off, unfortunately. Caused a bit of an air hazard up above. But that is where they took the picture. It was right here. It's also been the site of various films, so it's been used as a filming location, including the Dark Knight trilogy. Scenes were filmed here as well. So yeah, it's been used for a few things, but it's only now that it's really achieved its status as a great place to go out on the weekend.